When I was asked to MC, I've never done this before, and I actually, as I mentioned before, never been to CSSConf before, or a CSS conference. So I was really excited to come, and I was trying to think, like, well, how would I end such a great, like, group of speakers, and I don't know, I feel really inspired, and I was going to talk about, like, my wish list for, like, what I want in the future is CSS, but I realized I feel like we've tapped out CSS as a language. I think we've done it all, and my background started in academia, and then I worked in sports media tech at the MBA, and a couple of the main thing I learned from working in those industries is how to monetize things. So I figure, like, instead of talking about, like, what I want for CSS, I would give you some of my ideas on how maybe we should monetize CSS. So that's what I'm going to talk about. And so I have a couple ideas. Bear with me. They might sound a little crazy, but, like, I was going over my slides before, and now I'm starting to think, like, you know what? I think I've got, like, a good couple of ideas rolling. And what better place than CSSConf, where we have all these great minds here that work at really cool places that can make decisions and make these things happen. And who here would think it's a cool idea if we all made more money? Yeah. So important is the first thing I want to talk about. Originally, my wish list for CSS was to get rid of important. Important causes me a lot of stress, and it probably does for you, especially when you pull in third-party libraries that have CSS files, and they used important on all of them, and, you know, it's a pain in the butt. But, like, instead of getting rid of it, like, we could just make it harder for people to use by monetizing it. So, like, how can we monetize importance? Like, what is importance? It's like some weird, like, social construct that we can totally take advantage of. So I propose that we introduce some politics and bureaucracy into important. So, like, we can create the sort of, like, government of CSS politicians who pass laws on what can be important and what cannot be important. And I put democracy in scare quotes because really, like, we don't know how to do that sort of stuff. But, like, some people might say, like, oh, well, we have the W3C, like, we can handle it. But, like, I feel like they're a little distracted right now, so maybe, like, we can just do, like, a total coup and take over ourselves and create another group. We all know, like, the more groups you have deciding the same thing, obviously is, like, the best approach. So I figure we should contribute to that. And, like, in terms of bureaucracy, and these are all things that I learned working at Montclair State and the MBA, like, in order to, like, make it difficult to do something, we have to, like, make people apply for it or put it behind a paywall, or we can create these loose rules and a never-ending debate between our cool little democracy, and bury people in paperwork before they're able to use important in their code. And of course, like, the great thing about politics is that it always means more jobs and more money. Not necessarily distributed to us developers, but the people in power. Because when you have power, you get money, and when you have money and power, you have respect. And this is something Lil Kim's been telling me since 1998. So it obviously is something we should look into. Z-index, this is my favorite CSS property. Because I love, like, math and the Z-plane and all that cool stuff, but we can totally monetize the Z-index. The more money that you pay, the more stacks you can have. I mean, my default for Z-index is like 99999 up until, like, even beyond what a computer can technically handle with 32-bit integers. So, like, if we charge people for how high their Z-index goes, well, if you have a lot of layers, you know, you're going to have to pay more. So, and I mean, I don't know exactly who they're going to pay, like us, whoever we are, but I figured that's a good idea. That's all the money that we're going to be making if we do this. My favorite subject ever, SEO, right? Yeah. How can we monetize with SEO? Well, like, SEO just automatically means money anyway. So, like, I actually wrote some code I hope you can see. And, like, it doesn't really, like, when you're viewing in the browser, it doesn't actually really do anything. Like, this code is useless, but if we can incorporate like search optimization and bots and stuff, so like Paul, like see me later, we can discuss how Google wants to work this into their roadmap. But like, why don't we just like class name stuff everything? And then like everyone will definitely go to my site that's styled by this CSS. And like you can inject like your name and like all this sort of stuff into CSS you put into client projects, and then you get more clicks, and then the internet gives you more money, because that's like where this money's coming from, the internet. JavaScript and CSS. So like I'm a JavaScript developer. I know, boo. And like we all know that like CSS really don't need CSS as a language. We can do everything in CSS with JavaScript. So I mean, let's just get that out there. Performance and all that other stuff like aside, like, you know, JavaScript can do it. But like, let's turn the tables on JavaScript developers. Like, let's create a syntax in CSS where we can put JavaScript into the page. So like, I mean, I've come from a background in PHP development. So like, why don't we use like PHP to parse this and inject it? It just seems like it's totally easy and not tasking at all. So we can do that and make money through CSS that has JavaScript in it. So like, how would we do that? Well, let's rebrand it. People, whenever you like work in a company that markets things, and like this happens at sports teams all the time, they're like, oh, you know, ticket sales aren't so good, like what should we do? Like, oh, let's change the name of the team, and that will like totally like blow it up, and it usually works that way. So like, let's rename CSS with JavaScript syntax inside of it and call it script. We can have like t-shirts and like framework wars, because all of the money that I make off of web development is actually from arguing about code on Twitter. So like, we all can get involved in with this rebranding. I mentioned in the beginning of the conference that CSS is a line language, because you know what you see on the document, you end up looking at your page in the browser, and it turns out it's just full of lies. So I feel like if we want to be taken more seriously as CSS developers and therefore make more money, we need to sort of stop being big fat liars all the time. And I tweeted this a couple of days ago. I was actually really stressed out. I was working on a project where we were sorting a column, and there was CSS triangles pointing up when you sorted ascending, and would change down, and I was struggling with that. And then I was like thinking, like, why are we calling these triangles? Like, they're not triangles. Like, if you take a look at this code, it's only hiding parts of this box. You know, so like I'm standing behind this podium and you don't see my legs. You're not going to call me someone who doesn't have legs. So like, why are we lying about triangles? It drives me insane. Like, this is that triangle in CSS, and like, why don't we just use like HTML, which this is obviously more semantic. I take a look at ampersand hash x25b2, and I'm like, oh, that's an upward pointing solid triangle. So, and it's like so much less code, and you know, and yeah, we might have to memorize all these entities, but like, what else are we gonna do? So, that's a little taste of my upcoming talk at Deprecate CSSConf, where we just get rid of all CSS. So yeah, in a nutshell, monetization is really easy. We just introduce politics, bureaucracy, and just like basically not use CSS at all. Also, like again, like let's stop calling them triangles, and just like doing whatever I say, because I feel like anybody that's listened to me like usually gets it right along the way. So. I don't know. And also, like, on a serious note, let's, just based on all the talks today, like, keep the web pretty, funny, accessible, and experiment-friendly. And I'm really happy to see, based on what everyone's been talking about today, that we're doing exactly that with CSS. So I wanted to keep it brief, because I know you want to party, you've heard me talk all day, but I wanted to thank you. I'm on Twitter. It gets a little... that's a real email address. That's a real site. And if you like don't want to read serious stuff, I do write on Medium all of like my jokey satire things. So, and we're sponsored by Soundgarden. So thank you for bringing them in. And they're literally playing in New York City a week from today. I just learned that. I also don't really like Soundgarden, but don't let them know that. But really, and just to take it seriously, which for me, it sounds funny, I'm sure, I wanted to say that seeing all the talks today, like there's like talks from people who've never spoken before that sound so eloquent and are doing such awesome stuff. And I feel really honored to sort of be in the group with all of you. And I want to thank Nicole and all the organizers and Chris and Laura Williams for organizing this really awesome event. Like, I really needed this. I really did. So I want to thank you all for letting me make an ass out of myself all day. I love to do it, and I love to see all of you, my new friends. So thank you very much.